G'day everyone, we're going to call this meeting to order, if that's okay. If councillors wouldn't mind. Don't let me interrupt you, Councillor Castra. Whenever we gather at this committee, we acknowledge and pay respects to the traditional Aboriginal people of the land on which we are meeting today. We acknowledge all their descendants. We also acknowledge the many Aboriginal people from other regions, as well as the Torres Strait and South Sea Islander people who now live in our local area and have made an important contribution to our community. Awesome. I'll kick off with apologies. I don't think there is any apologies today, but it's great having a bunch of other councillors who are coming to visit. Councillor Gates, great to have you with us. Councillor Fowler, Councillor Taylor, and everyone else is on committee. There's no leaves of absence, but we do have the first item of business, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. If I can get a mover for those minutes, that would be great. Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Oh, almost lapsed for want of a seconder, but I'll take Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favour of confirming those minutes? That motion is carried. Thank you. We don't have any start items in our reports and presentations, but we do have the forward planning schedule. Did anyone want to unstar that item? Everyone's happy with that? Great. Could I get a mover for that forward planning schedule? Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favour? Motion is carried. We're going to kick off with Alicia Swain and her team are going to report to us in relation to the Community Safety Program Review, which we've had some presentations about before, but there's new information. Let's get on with it. Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillors, are you happy to take a presentation this morning?
Yes, please.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Through the Chair, thanks for having us this morning, councillors, Luke, Anna and myself, to present an update on the Community Safety Program Review.
For those of you who don't know, this is Matt.
And I'm Matt, yes. Thank you. So you'll recall on the 8th of August last year, we presented you the results of the Safe City Survey, the second Safe City survey conducted by Council, and we committed then to do a review of our community safety program to look at any future opportunities to enhance our role within community safety, but also look at a fit-for-purpose measure for how we measure our role within community safety, noting that in the Council plan we measure perceptions of safety holistically as our current measure. Very, very briefly, just to touch base that we have a community safety program at the moment, which is one of our primary programs that tells us what we're doing to achieve that perceptions of safety KPI. And our Safe City survey results last year, you'll recall we had an 11% decrease in perceptions of safety across the community. We talked about, you'll recall we talked about the drivers around that being actual crime, media influence, social media, timing of the survey, lots of different factors which implement that particular measure. And we'll talk about some of our findings around that and what we found to date shortly. I'm not going to harp too much on this here. I think we've heard it before. So I'll get into a bit of the review and what we benchmarked and what we found, and then I'll call up Anna and she can talk through some of the next steps. So we did some comprehensive benchmarking. We really wanted to learn what do other local governments do in this space, what innovative projects or ideas do they have that potentially we could implement to support our program moving forward. So of the 19 local governments we engaged with from Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, Adelaide, a lot of local governments in this area as well. We found 14 of them had a dedicated community safety or crime prevention program. 5 of them didn't have any specific programs in this space, but do deliver services such as crime prevention through environmental design, CCTV, public lighting, the similar services that we would provide on a day-to-day basis, regulation, beach safety if they're on the beach, for example. What we did find is the focus areas in some of these plans for each council were slightly different depending on the issues they were facing. So some councils, for example, had a real heavy focus on robbery and break-in because that was one of their key crime stats within their area, and they had targeted programs to try and mitigate that within their role within their local government area. And so finding for us was it's really important that we make this plan personable for our local government area and the challenges we're facing. We couldn't find any trends there to say we should focus on this area or that area. It's very specific to the particular team. And like I said, the services delivered at a BAU day-to-day space is pretty consistent across all those areas. You can see some of those services on the screen in front of you there. The research and consultation. So we did some comprehensive research. I think all councillors have been engaged at some point along this review process. Firstly, we used our data sources. So our current program, we looked at that and we looked at, are we doing the right initiatives or can we do more to support community safety? We looked at our survey results and the QPS crime data as well. We really want to make sure we're focusing our efforts on the data-driven, evidence-based areas through crime or what our community members are saying are the problems. We held an internal community safety, internal stakeholder group meeting. We had 26 teams across council represented there, where we really worked with that team to understand what else can we do to support our community. That included teams from the road safety space, our communities area, and all other areas across the city. And what you'll note, and I'm sure Anna will talk about this as well, is we don't want to replicate plans and strategies we already have within this city. So we already have a road safety plan, for example. We haven't included that in here because we've already got work underway to mitigate that particular issue. So we didn't want to cross that over and have plans duplicating other plans. We held a workshop with our Safer Suburbs Forum late last year, which I believe some councillors in this room attended. We had 9 agencies from across Queensland and state government representatives as well, where we tested our definition of community safety with them. We tested the focus areas that we're going to prioritise our effort and some of the initiatives that we'd identified through this process. It was a really great session where we really got to tease out where should we focus and what those initiatives should be, and how we can support and partner with some of our partners like the police, Neighbourhood Watch and others. We also held engagements with yourselves as divisional councillors over the last few months. And finally, we partnered with our team in Service Gold Coast to do some focus groups. We had 26 residents come in across various sessions, and we really wanted to unpack and dive into community safety, what it means to you. And you'll note in the report here, we've got an attachment which goes through the detail there. Just a couple of key points from that before I hand over to Anna. The top safety concerns communicated by that focus group were very consistent with what we found in our survey. So break-in, car theft, antisocial behaviour, those type of things. The participants also communicated that the city's role in community safety is important to them, but we're really cognizant that we want to make sure we've got the right role for some of these activities. So where there are lead agencies delivering from a state or other areas, we want to partner with them and advocate. We don't necessarily want to step on their toes, and we've reflected that in the recommendations in the plan today. I'll stop there and I'll hand over to Anna.
Good morning, Chair and councillors. Thank you, Matt. So the next slide here is looking at establishing a definition for community safety specific to us here at the City of Gold Coast. So as part of our review, we looked at what community safety means to our residents. We looked at some best practice sort of definitions across Australia to come up with this definition that has local relevance for us here. We also consulted with the Safer Suburbs Forum members, community residents, and also the city internal officers at the workshop that Matt referenced earlier. So the definition displayed on the screen there is aimed to reflect that community safety is an important issue to all of our residents in the community, and it captures the actual and perceived safety that relates to community safety, and also that community safety links to livability, wellbeing, tourism and business. So we've heard a bit about the review process and all of the information and data that was analysed in the consultation. So from all of that information, we've grouped all of the feedback into 4 key focus areas proposed to be part of our community safety program moving forward. Across the 4 focus areas, 23 new actions are proposed to be delivered across the next 4 years. So these are in addition to our ongoing business as usual services. The first focus area, increasing personal safety and security. This area has been included due to the fact that break and enter and car theft came out as residents' top community safety concern locally. The actions within this focus area are designed to support our community implement strategies to reduce the likelihood of being victims of crime, both at their homes as well as when they're out and about in our public spaces. And it's recognised that being safe and secure has that direct impact on livability and the city's reputation as a safe city. The second focus area, creating safe spaces, reflects the city's key role in designing and managing public spaces. Key actions in this focus area will include crime prevention through environmental design and public safety CCTV initiatives. This continues to be an ongoing priority area to ensure that our public spaces promote safety and deter opportunities for crime. This is an area where the city can have a very direct influence. Enhancing perceptions of safety is the third focus area, involving actions that contribute to improving feelings of safety. This focus area obviously links directly to those survey results where we saw the decrease in perceptions of safety. Actions in this focus area will include opportunities to promote real facts about crime trends and bust some myths and perceptions that may have been developed based on inaccurate sources or media reporting. Actions will also include supporting and delivering projects that achieve positive community safety outcomes. The final focus area highlighted is reducing domestic and family violence. This has been drawn out specifically given that crime rates relating to domestic and family violence offences continue to experience an upward trend, whereas most other crime offence categories have fluctuated over recent years. While the city is not the lead agency in responding to this issue, it is evident that given the significance and prevalence of the issue locally, a whole-of-community response is required, and the city does have an opportunity to have a positive impact in this space as a large employer, as well as through working closely and engaging with our local community and services. This is a snapshot of all 23 actions which you will have had access to in your agenda item. Again, these are proposed over and above our ongoing services and also designed not to cross over with some of those other areas, for example, road safety as mentioned. Just to highlight a few of the key new actions under each of those 4 themes. Under the personal safety and security theme, we've proposed a new crime deterrent incentive program. Essentially, this would involve offering residents a rebate for the purchase of approved security equipment for their private properties, such as CCTV or sensor lighting, to enhance security at their own homes. Given the cost of living pressures currently and the fact that property security is residents' #1 concern, we would anticipate this program to be very well received and have a direct impact on reducing crime as well as improving feelings of safety for people in their own homes. Through the Creating Safer Spaces theme, CCTV expansion is one of the new actions planned, which will be progressed through the delivery of the Safety Camera Network 10-year plan, which involves continuing upgrades and expansions, particularly in our growing urban village areas across the city. A councillor toolkit is proposed as an action in the perceptions of safety focus area. This would involve resources, information, suggested communications such as e-news items or social media posts developed to address key concerns regularly raised by residents, as well as relating to citywide issues, but would also give us the opportunity to develop some really locally specific, more targeted information that can be shared in your local communities. And under the Reducing Domestic and Family Violence focus area, a community training package is proposed. The training has been trialled with successful results and involves upskilling community and sporting groups in how to become active bystanders when coming into contact with potential domestic and family violence incidents. By training the community groups that utilise our sporting facilities and community centres, participants can then share that knowledge and action it amongst their family, friends and work colleagues, which has that greater impact citywide. I'll pass back to Matt to finish our presentation.
Thank you, Anna. A couple more slides and we'll open up for questions. Just relating to the council plan measure of success, perceptions of safety. So during our benchmarking and research, we found that the perceptions of safety measure through a survey is common in every local government we engaged with. While the survey itself is common, the specific indicator they use to determine perceptions of safety does differ. And what I mean by that is some councils will ask for perceptions of safety for the whole local government area or the city. Some will ask it for just public spaces, or like us, some will ask it for their neighbourhoods. So that is the common measure at the moment. What we did find is every council we engaged with found that a challenging measure to determine if their role is being successful in improving community safety, because that survey takes in everything delivered and managed by multiple agencies across the city. So unfortunately, during this review, we couldn't find an indicator anywhere in local government or broader that defines the council's role within community safety. So it is something we want to continue to progress. We think it's important. And with the council plan review coming up in the next year or so, we want to link in with the enterprise strategy team there and come up with a fit-for-purpose measure so we can stand up here in front of you and say the investment, the initiative, the work that we've done within our role at the city has moved the dial towards where we want to go. That being said, we do want to continue to survey the community every 3 years through the Safe Cities Survey. It's a great data source. It's important to hear what our residents are saying and what they're feeling in the community, and it does help us prioritise our investment and our actions. All right, next steps. So hopefully following today in council approval, we will be starting to move on some of these actions, and we'll provide an update to the Mayor's Safer Suburbs Forum on February the 20th. Thanks, Anna. Around about May, if these recommendations are approved, we will update our community safety program to reflect the changes. That'll include the 23 actions Anna mentioned, but we'll also call out the services the council already deliver in this space, because we do a lot across every department within this city for community safety. But we want to acknowledge those services, but then talk about what else we're doing to manage this area. Financial year 25-26 is when we'll be looking to come back with the enterprise strategy team with a proposed measure. And then in 27-28, we'll complete our third Safe City survey, and pending the results of that, we will look at potentially a review of the program again. It's good practice to continue to look at what we're doing and improve. That's all for the presentation, so if we can take any questions.
Okay, I've got Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Curtis, then Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. As we all know, safety is important in our suburbs, and I know we do a great job in relation to our CCT network and supporting in a lot of areas that state government are heavily involved. But with our CCV network, and obviously we're relying on the police to act in that space, do we ever see a gap where we may be identifying problems, but the ability for state agencies to react? I know in the area where we've got cameras that are monitoring situations, is there a gap in that space? I mean, we can continue to have cameras, but if we don't have our agencies able to act, do we review that area?
Anna, thoughts?
Through the chair, thank you, councillor, for the question. Essentially, I guess from the safety camera network perspective, the model is different in different parts of the city. So where we have emergency services directly on the ground, we obviously have an impact in terms of an immediate responsibility, whereas some parts of the city where the perhaps response isn't able to be immediate, it's more of an evidentiary intelligence gathering tool. The city can always take up, I guess, advocacy opportunities as we look to expand our CCTV network to make sure it, I guess, continues to be as effective as possible.
Yeah, happy with that? Yeah, great. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, through the chair. Thanks for the report and for your ongoing work in this space. I think it's testament to the fact that people actually feel more safe in our public spaces than they do in their homes is evidence that you're doing a really great job. I wanted to focus on focus area and the action 1.1, which is to establish a city neighbourhood watch support program, and it talks that its purpose is to strengthen support to residents to keep safe, including to adopt crime prevention strategies to increase personal, home and vehicle safety.
Sorry,
but I just wanted to...
What page are you on, sorry?
Oh, sorry, that's on page 20,
Cool.
And it's focus area 1 and then the very first point. And I was interested in what that entails practically. What would the City Neighbourhood Watch support program look like practically?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. So when we engaged with our neighbourhood watch partners in the Mayor's Safer Suburbs Forum, there is an opportunity to partner with them and utilise both of our resources to start communicating through their program. To deliver and targeted initiatives to support residents at their home. So they have quite a good extensive reach of community members face to face, day to day. So we want to utilise our tools and our skills to help them get that message out there. The specifics of the program program haven't been finalised yet, so that's something, if we get approval to continue, we'll develop a targeted program with our representatives through the Mayor's Safer Suburbs Forum and look at how we can partner together to deliver better outcomes.
So would it be, through the chair, would it be messaging predominantly in the sharing of information, or are we talking like more like grants and monetary support?
Through the chair, I think both are opportunities we want to seek there. So definitely messaging and using our comms channels. But if we can support them through grants opportunities, we'll definitely utilise our resources to help.
Through the chair, if I could just add a little bit to that as well. I think tangibly, Councillor, what we'd really be looking at is to really try and assist and advocate for the expansion of that particular network, and then to provide that real-time support, both in terms of available information that we obviously have as local government around those particular communities, as well as with those specific groups, to try and get the real tangible information around their neighbourhood-specific community safety to those particular residents. So I think the major action in that would be really around supporting those networks, supporting those meetings directly with the community groups.
I might, if you don't mind, at the Safer Suburbs Forum this came up, and I sit on that forum, and I spoke with some of the guys there and talked about that community perceptions of safety are sometimes influenced by the active capability of a local neighbourhood watch group, and the idea of helping those groups be more effective in their local community will hopefully have a positive impact on perceptions of safety. So how I interpreted it was like that, but that's the anecdotal feedback that we had from the Safer Suburbs Forum about why this initiative is part of the focus.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. I feel like I've been inadequately equipped myself to support those groups and potentially help communities raise them where they've identified a need. So that's promising. And then it's a similar question for focus areas. So the next page over on 21, focus area 3.3. And I'm guessing it's going to be a similar answer, but I just wanted to know the practicality of that point, which is equipping councillors with safety tools and resources to facilitate active engagement. So would that be a similar framework?
Through the chair, correct, Councillor. So we'd be looking at trying to make sure that there are resources available to support all councillors specific to that division that assist to communicate real-time information around community safety and to try and, I guess, provide that information that is supported by fact and data, as opposed to, you know, potentially at times there's information out there that might be second or third hand and might be misinterpreted. So we're trying to get some resources out there that tell the actual story.
And then my final one for now,
take all the time you need.
Chair, you'll indulge me. It was about the bystander training sessions, and I wondered if anybody in the room has attended one of those and can give some feedback.
So I can. So some time ago we engaged with what was run by Griffith University, a program called the MATE Bystander Program, and we've been delivering workshops, and I did some facilitator training. I've done those, but we've got about a dozen people that have went through a facilitator training in my division. And that program has now evolved away from Griffith and is now being run by a group that's formed kind of naturally and with Griffith's support. So Griffith, being a research organisation, not a workshop delivery organisation, have asked for the people who were previously employed by Griffith to start their own program for workshop delivery. Their primary, the basic answer to your question is yes, I've attended a workshop. Yes, I found it very good. I found it very functional, such that I even became a facilitator, and I'm now delivering it in my community to try to have a greater impact on influencing people's perceptions of domestic violence and being better bystanders. But the workshops themselves, I'm assuming, would not necessarily be only done by that organisation. There are other organisations that do bystander training, but that is a local group that are doing it well at the moment. Does that answer your question? All right, so I did promise I'd go to Councillor Marshall, and then I got Councillor Gates, Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Fowler, Councillor Martin, Councillor Doran. So everyone wants to have a go. If we're talking about either the bystander training or neighbourhood watch, if that's the question, then we're going to try to play on those two, and then I'm going to come to you, Councillor Marshall, just so we're staying on theme. So I'm going to go to Councillor Gates because you had a hand up first, and then Councillor Fowler.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just interested to hear from the other councillors the kind of effectiveness of Neighbourhood Watch right now, because my personal experience in the area that I represent is that with the advent of social media, it's changed significantly. And where it used to be that representatives walked the community and distributed the neighbourhood watch flyer and what have you. That kind of generated the community involvement, whereas in Division 3 they've become online groups now, and it doesn't seem to me, it just generates online chat.
So,
and it doesn't actually do what it used to do in terms of bringing community together. So I'm wondering if that's specific to where I represent or whether it's similar in other areas, and what our involvement can be in sort of working with them to improve what used to be a fantastic community organisation but has changed significantly in my experience.
So I'm conscious of creating a kind of almost a conversational workshop debate here, but I think this is an important topic. I'm going to respond first, and then I'm going to go to people who would like to make a comment about Councillor Gates' open question. The first thing I'd say is I've got very functional and efficient and communicative neighbourhood watch groups in my division, and then I have some that are a social group or an administrator of a very delinquent Facebook page that is still technically a neighbourhood watch group but aren't as functional. So I have kind of the whole spectrum of different groups. And what I find in the most productive, efficient and communicative groups, they have a quite volunteer, community-minded leader of sorts who is likeable and engaging and distributes information and rallies, like almost like a community organiser. And what I would hope is through this program is that the characteristics and practices of that sort of community organiser, neighbourhood watch leader can be turned into some sort of platform or, I don't know, scope of work or recommendations for other groups to potentially adopt and be more effective. That's what I would hope. I probably acknowledge your point that some neighbourhood watch groups are just, with the advent of social media, it's really just an online social gathering. But the effectiveness and perceptions of safety in those community organisations where there is an organised community leader of sorts plus some resources available, I don't think we can deny that actually improves perceptions of safety in those communities.
Yeah, I get that too, but when you think back to their establishment being connected with the Queensland Police Service, and that the Queensland Police Service really has carriage of whether they become an authorised group or not, I'm just wondering where we sit and how we can intervene in this space to any great extent.
I don't know, maybe you've got to ask the officers. The way I provide resources is providing a community room. So I enable them to come and book a community meeting room that I book for them so there's no cost. And I have once every second month a meeting called the Mudgebar Police Community Consultative Committee, where all of the neighbourhood watch groups are invited to come and share information about their activities and issues in their communities.
You've got a different deal from me. It's 85% discount for a community room where I work.
We can take that offline, but yeah, when a councillor books a room, my understanding is that there's no internal transfers anymore. So we'll say that for another day. But I had Councillor Fowler, Councillor Curtis, Councillor Taylor on the topic of neighbourhood watch groups, and then we're going to come back to any other questions. Oh, no? Yes?
Sorry, Chair, you said neighbourhood watch groups or bystander training.
Okay. All good. Great. You're welcome to do
bystander
either.
training?
Yeah, either.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I just have a fair bit of experience in the domestic and family violence space in my career before I was a councillor, and I guess while I understand that we have a role to play as a local government, I see it primarily as an advocacy role, with the bulk of the work sitting with the state government. And my question before I get to the bystander training is, do we really think that it should be the city's responsibility to develop a Gold Coast domestic and family violence action plan, or should that body of work sit with the state and then we have a part in that to facilitate on the ground? That's my first question. And then bystander training, in my experience, it's not a flash in the pan approach. I'm wanting impact if we are going to be playing in this space, rather than, doing one bystander training session in the south, the central and the north to me isn't effective. It needs to be bigger. It needs to have more impact. So similar to what Councillor Tozer had started in Mudgeeraba at a local level, if we were seeing our responsibility in this space to deliver this, I feel like it should be at a divisional local level, and it should be on the ground, and it should be more than one, rather than, just one in the 3 regions of the city. So my questions, to summarise, is do we think that it should be the city's role to actually develop the Gold Coast Domestic and Family Violence Action Plan? Is that our place? And the second part is, do we actually think that that's an effective approach to bystander training across the city if the city is playing in this space?
Through the chair. So in regards to your first question, through the Safer Suburbs Forum, it was agreed with some of those parties there that we could collaborate to develop that plan. So the action specifically is about collaborating with other agencies and community organisations. A question around the lead is a good one. When we kick this action off, we'll look to engage our state partners and look at who can lead that development of that action plan. Acknowledging your question or your comments around our role within this space. We have a role to play, whether it's leading, collaborating, partnering with those organisations to create a plan, which we did have several years back within the city. And your second question, acknowledge your comments around the active bystander training there. Maybe it is something we can look at embedding more permanently and full-time over the course of these years, rather than just doing 3 per year.
Just again, from the local perspective, where over the last 2 years we've been running these workshops, I think there's a role for. So first question is, should we be doing it? My view is yes, and I think the reason isn't because we want to be in people's homes at all, but I think that mums and dads and kids and families congregate in lots of our public open spaces, and we lease them to organisations, and then expect them to keep those places safe, and they're all volunteers, and I think council can have a role to play in helping community groups keep their sports facilities, clubhouses safe for families. I think there's a place for us to play in that space. Part 2 is the question about bystander training. I think there's a role for us to play in catalysing momentum. And what I mean by that is that the feedback that we've had over the last 2 years is that most people who come to one of these workshops didn't, before they came, they were like, I want to do something. I know this is an issue. I'm not actually facing this issue myself. I'm feeling in good space. I want to do something that can make me feel like I'm contributing, and I want to learn more about how I can shape my community positively when it comes to family violence and conflict. And there was a role, I think there's a really strong role that we've played in Division 9 in catalysing momentum. So getting a person who's interested in doing something and not having them just abandon that and then move back. Because obviously if we don't start doing something, then no one starts doing something. That kind of brings me to the other question you asked, which is, should the state be the catalyser of that momentum, or should the city be the catalyser of that momentum? I think the state is too big because communities are so individual and unique, both geographically and also socioeconomically, and that catalysing momentum is best delivered at a local level because each community is so different. I'm only relaying that from my personal experience, and I know that you asked for the officers, but...
Thank you, Chair. And just to clarify, my question was just in relation of the creation of the plan. I do think that the city has a role to play on the ground in the delivery and facilitation of, but I feel like when we're looking at the creation of a plan and the lead role, is a body of work being done at a state level that we can then grab and replicate on the ground? That was the question, just to clarify.
Great. So we're still on the topic of Neighbourhood Watch and bystander training. So I promised Nick Marshall, Councillor Marshall, I'd go to him. Are either of your questions about that, Councillor Marshall? Great. So I'm going to go to Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, and I really welcome Councillor Gates' question to open some dialogue, and I'm going to take the opportunity because the officers are obviously looking at a support program, and I wanted to share what my concerns with the Neighbourhood Watch programs are. I've got 2 with desires to have more across my division. One's old school, and it's fantastic, and I can really see the value in that one. The second one is a little bit different, but functions not as an online platform that just perpetuates outrage and fear. So it's functional, but I've had requests to develop other ones that are fully online, and I've just been nervous because I feel like social media is not always great at delivering what it is that those programs seek. So I just wanted to put my feelings forward, and I think they might match what Councillor Gates' sense was in her community. And I think there is a push from Neighbourhood Watch to have fully online groups, and I have concerns with that, and it's hard for me to get behind them with my strong feelings about social media.
Through the Chair, just to respond to that, Councillor, I think the intention of that particular action was to try and lever off that particular group for their community connectedness. So, I guess explicit throughout this process has been the fact that that community connectedness, that sense of community, is actually really important for community safety as well. So the intention is to try and lever off that and use it as a, where appropriate, divisional specific, probably community specific, where appropriate, to use that as a platform to give information that is going to support that particular community to understand their community safety situation specifically. So certainly acknowledge those aspects around the social media, and I think there are some potential negatives associated with that we'll have to navigate to ensure that that doesn't occur. And if I can just quickly also just address in terms of the plan from yourself, Councillor, the intent wasn't to position the city as the lead, but certainly to act as a facilitator and advocate for a multi-agency, including state-based agencies, to have a collective Gold Coast-specific approach.
We've got Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Wilkinson, then Councillor Doran.
Yeah, I just want to give an input into the groups that I've had. I've got one really strong group. I had a second group.
Neighbourhood Watch group, you mean?
Neighbourhood Watch group that was very strong, but fell away. And then I've had 2 or 3 other communities that want to actually create a Neighbourhood Watch. Each of the times that we see it, it's someone that, as Councillor Tozer mentioned, someone that's leading it. It's the most important. The one that was very strong had a great leader. Once that particular leader moved on, because they were in the position for a long period of time, I think the new ones coming through didn't have the understanding or the support to continue it. And I think that the groups that do want to start, I find, don't have that support of how to actually create one. I've got an ability to put them in the right direction and try and build a particular group that focuses on Neighbourhood Watch. But with volunteers today, that's our challenge. And I think it's, if we've got the opportunity when we have got someone that's willing to drive it, the support around that would be really, really important. Obviously, the police connection makes these groups really strong as well.
Okay. Are you guys okay with that just being a comment as opposed to a question? Yeah. So Councillor Wilkinson, then Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. Mine will be more of a comment as well, and as an observation from what I've seen across my community. So I've got some really active old school neighbourhood watch groups like Crestwood Heights. I've got some that exist like Parkwood that unfortunately haven't been quite as active as what they have been in previous years. And then I've got other ones like the Labrador E-Watch group. But an observation that I've observed with neighbourhood watch groups in general over the last, say, decade or so is that the emergence of the e-watch groups hasn't just been necessarily facilitated because of the ease of social media. It's actually some of the complexities behind establishing some of these neighbourhood watch groups is part of their infancy. My understanding is that there is a level of executive appointments that need to be given for physically formed groups, and finding those individuals across communities at times can be challenging. So I think that there has been a bit of a transition in some communities, and I've got one in Labrador where we've seen the emergence of an e-watch group that I think does hold value. But again, it's about the delivery aspects of how that then continues to go forward. I don't know if there's other further complexities around insurances for e-watch groups is comparativeness to an established physical neighbourhood watch group. But again, that's some of potentially the clarity that we could seek, in due course. I certainly support a collaboration with the QPS and the neighbourhood watch groups going forward. I think it's a good initiative, but I think it's also something that we need to kind of work out, or for me personally, see how we do play our role in that local sense. And, again, whether the physically formed ones, how do we especially for those that exist and maybe have become a little bit quieter than what they once have, how do we try to, from a council level, stimulate that when really it's an establishment under a state governing body? So I welcome the whole idea, but it's just, again, I'd like to see a little bit more around the role we will play, I guess, and that'll come in due course, I'm sure. So, but that's my commentary I thought I'd add.
Cool. I'm going to go to Councillor Doran and then Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got questions about the report, but just to close off the Neighbourhood Watch discussion, if I could just convey my community's experience to Councillor Gates, that was the original question that started us on this journey.
Thank you.
I've noticed the proliferation of WhatsApp groups in certain communities that have taken some of the communication channels that Neighbourhood Watch use, but the Neighbourhood Watch program, I see it as a really important communication tool. And one of the things when I was growing up, I was always told that when there was a Neighbourhood Watch label on a letterbox, that if I was ever in trouble, that was a place where you could go in and get some safe and be safe. And I think that even in a fast-paced environment where we're time poor and we're volunteer poor, to speak to Councillor Taylor's comments before, if there is a selection of dedicated community members that want to get out there and try to create some awareness around safety, then the city should help them, even if it is not entirely our responsibility, because of the one simple thing that it could lead to, which is a kid on the way home from school popping into a house for some safety. So that's my comments on my experience in the community. Could it be better? But I think the people that show up and try to make a difference are doing something good for the community.
All right, I'm going to come back to you very quickly after Councillor Martin's had a few words.
Thank you, Chair. My comment, just in relation to some current issues, obviously in Division 13, in relation to this safety plan, homelessness is mentioned here around safe people, safe places, and it's obviously focused on.
Just going to pause you there, Councillor Martin. Is there anything else on Neighbourhood Watch or bystander training? Yeah, it's all right. No, that's great. Councillor Martin, I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to go back to Councillor Doran.
Thank you. Is centred around advocacy, connection of services, and affordable housing. But I suppose there are situations as we get in the community where there's different levels of antisocial behaviour, and I know the complexity of homelessness and antisocial, but at times there is a small component with, there's drug use, there's antisocial, there's domestic violence, and so I know that we've got the Homeless Action Plan coming back within a different branch in March, but just obviously the two plans linked together, just really seeking the view as to when it is not just a connection of services, but we've actually got either a perceived or a real antisocial element within homelessness, how we can capture the action plans between this program and the Homeless Action Plan in the future.
Through the Chair. So, Councillor, I think as sort of talked about during the presentation, we've deliberately tried to deconflict between the different plans that exist within the city to ensure there isn't that double up, but certainly acknowledge that particular issue does have a community safety input. So from call it a business as usual point of view, the intention is also to highlight that there is an existing services provided from the city around that specific issue, primarily in terms of that connection space, but also within that compliance and regulation space, and our ability to partner with law enforcement agencies to try and deal with those issues as quickly and as effectively as possible.
Cool. Councillor Doran and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just got a couple of questions.
So broad questions now about the whole report.
anything we like.
And Councillor Marshall can go straight after Councillor Doran instead of Councillor Wilkinson because I skipped him last time.
Anna, you mentioned when you were speaking before that you made a comment. I didn't catch all of the line, but you made reference to real facts and communication piece. Is that can you just elaborate a little bit on that? But is that designed to try to correct the imbalance which we learnt last year around the perception of crime versus the crime statistics, which we learnt in a report last year was flat, but the perception of crime had increased? Could you see, is that a comment relating to that imbalance?
Through the Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Correct, yes. Given the decrease in perceptions of safety and the research we've looked at in terms of what might influence that, obviously we're aware that there's all of those range of external factors that that contribute. But I guess this action is to highlight the city has opportunities to share, I guess, facts through our everyday communication with residents and through our other engagements. So yes, to I guess assist to promote real crime data through Safer Suburbs Forum and media opportunities and things like that. And additionally then through programs like Neighbourhood Heroes to actually highlight the positive work that is being done to at least do our part in counterbalancing some of those other influences that are in the community. We've also got the Safer Suburbs Awards program, so activities like that we're actually showcasing, whilst we might be hearing some negative stories, there's actually all of these real positives happening as well.
Thank you. Chair, the report speaks to a safety camera expansion, and it also speaks to deploying an additional mobile CCTV anti-hooning trailer. With regards to the anti-hooning trailer, I don't see anything in the budget in this particular report, considerations suggesting there's more money going to that. Could you outline how we're going to pay for the new trailer? Yeah, so it's just that in the funding recommendations in this report, it doesn't speak to it. So I'm just
going to let that go to the officers and have them respond.
Through the chair, yeah. So we've actually already implemented that action, and we have the second anti-hooning trailer already live around the city from existing funding.
One? I just read this as another new one. It's not another. We're not getting a third.
Through the chair, to answer that question directly, so as part of that 10-year safety camera network plan, the intention is to identify those opportunities, including additional opportunities for anti-hooning trailers, and then to proceed through the normal budgeting process to request that specifically, depending on that feedback from supporting agencies like QPS around their ability to respond and to make sure that's effective.
Can I just clarify? So there's currently 2 anti-hooning trailers in the city, is that correct? And the current budget that we're about to go in and consider, is there any provisions or requests for more of those anti-hooning trailers in that budget?
Chair, in terms of the proposed next financial year's budget, there will
the 25-26 one that we're going to
there won't specifically necessarily be a request for an additional funding for an anti-hooning trailer in that particular financial year, but with the 10-year safety camera network plan, it will then look to take into consideration expansion requirements, and then future budgets may request that.
Okay, cool. Councillor Doran, back to you.
Thank you. And the proposal about the grant program for private residents, $250 for 100 private residents per division. Could you talk a bit about the specifics of that? I actually don't know if $250 is sufficient to get a camera system installed, and will they have to, imagine, buy it and then ask to collect those costs, or how will that work?
Yeah, through the chair. So we've seen this program rolled out in several other local governments, very similar to what you just mentioned there. So where residents go and purchase a particular bit of equipment, we'll have a cost for different types of equipment where we can rebate them, trying to do that equitably and fairly across the community as best we can. And they would then, once they've purchased equipment, be able to apply for a rebate through that program. I think we've budgeted for about $350,000 per year for that. The councils we spoke to saw some really positive sentiment from their community from this program. So current cost of living crisis, there was a way that residents could actually physically do something to support them in their home, whether through lighting, CCTV, windows, or whatever it was. So we think it's a real good program that can actually physically help people in their day-to-day with their housing or their cars.
I'm going to come back to everyone there. Councillor Doran, you currently have the floor.
I have another question, but I think there's questions about
There is definitely some questions about that one. Are you okay if we go to those questions and come back? So we're going to stay on this topic of $250 for security equipment. And Councillor Martin went first, then Councillor Gates. It was a bit of a race to see who could put their hand up first. So we're going to go Councillor Martin, Councillor Gates, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thanks, Chair. Just on that program, would the city be, I guess, distributing guidelines? Say it's CCTV at the home, supportive of that at the home, but I guess, there's all sorts of complexities around monitoring public spaces or neighbour spaces and privacy. Is there guidelines that we distribute, or there's laws around surveillance that they might need to consider?
Through the chair, if I can address a couple of those points, councillor. So the guidelines that would be associated with that particular program are obviously yet to be fully formed, but there would absolutely have a need to have those that would be distributed to enable then residents to effectively apply for that particular grant program. I think the main aim of that program is to incentivise, not necessarily cover full costs. So associated with that is then going to be a need to have standards specific to those particular systems, which would absolutely comply with legislative requirements. But it is focusing on residential premises as you're trying to incentivise that component as opposed to public spaces, if that answers that question.
Councillor Gates, Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. In the previous council, Councillor Tozer will recall there was a trial where private residents could register their own CCTV cameras with the Queensland Police so that they could assist in anything that was being pursued. Can you tell me what the response to that was? Because my understanding is it was very limited and that it didn't work and that it wasn't used in any positive way. So I'm just wrestling with this a little bit given the report and what it suggests as 100 potential residents per division. And my next question would be, how would that be? Would that be a first in, first serve? And then if someone else came forward, how could we possibly refuse to assist if the council indeed believes that's a worthwhile thing to do on the basis of the previous failed trial?
So before I throw to officers, in Mudgeeraba, the officer in charge hosted a number of shopping centre meets where he collected information about people's private CCTV and stored it in the QPS database. So my experience of that program is that it continues, and I have a close relationship with the officer in charge of Mudgeeraba, and he's actually taken the initiative. I think he lamented that some of his colleagues perhaps lacked the resources or availability to be able to do that, but he saw it as important enough to allocate time to do it. So I probably wouldn't characterise it as a failure in my division, but I appreciate in other places it may
I'd like to know how many people responded to that trial across the city, please, if I may.
Through the chair, thank you, councillor. So the Community Camera Alliance trial, my understanding of that program is the intention was somewhat different to what we're proposing in this action. So the QPS with the Camera Alliance trial was more about police knowing where the cameras are. So if there's an incident on a certain street, they've got to register to say, look, this property has a private CCTV. We know how to contact them. We can request that footage quickly. Whereas this program is more around residents having their own security at their own property, so it's a little bit of a different theme there. And in terms of the availability of the grant, I guess we obviously would develop those terms and conditions and equitable process. We propose to run it for the 4 years for the life of this program. And we'd definitely work through terms and conditions. I'd imagine it would have to be, we'd have to come up with an eligibility and an assessment process to make it fair.
I have a bit of a problem with it from the point of view of affordability for our ratepayers in a cost of living situation. Is that the best thing we could do with our buck in the city to provide a rebate of that nature rather than a rebate that helps people with day-to-day living costs? I have an issue with it because not everyone can afford a personal camera network in their home to protect their property. So I'll save that, but I still don't know how many. I still don't know how many people responded to that opportunity to provide their personal information to the police. But my recollection was that it was very limited.
So I reckon we might take that information, like that question on notice. Is that okay? Yeah. And I'm going to go to Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Hamill, and then Councillor Curtis.
Thanks, Chair.
It's lots of debate, and I appreciate it. It's great.
Thanks, Chair. My question isn't too dissimilar to the others that have been somewhat raised, but it was in relation to, there's a lot of chat about at residential homes, the CCTV camera aspects in relation to CSP 1.2. I just wanted to know when we as councillors would likely see an itemised list of some of the other considerations. Like, we're not talking about just CCTV cameras. It could be window locks, it could be front doors, screens, it could be a number of things. So I just wanted to get an idea of what other opportunities there may be and when we would likely get an idea of that list. But additionally, just to Luke's comment before where he used the word, it's more, the word was incentivise. So this would then also point to me that this isn't something for just your regular Joe Blow, which I think Councillor Gates was touching to a degree on the sense of the cost of living pressures. This isn't for, if I was going to go down to Bunnings and buy a couple of padlocks kind of thing. That's not what this particular funding or this particular setup that we're looking to propose is going to accommodate in that respect to go and apply for this. This is for what I'm now perceiving to be more larger scale kind of preventative measures at the home that would exceed $250 in their nature in general. Would that be a fair, comment?
Through the chair, if we can just deal with that last component, councillor. So, the intention, I guess, today is to gain support from this committee, and then hopefully following on from that, council around these proposed actions. The intention is then to obviously fully form these particular actions into the specific program, and that be brought back for that final endorsement. This will then provide that real tangible, detailed information that I think you're seeking. But in terms of specific to the that incentivisation, so I think it would extend not just to your standard locks, window locks, door locks, those aspects, but also to potentially alarm and CCTV systems. Noting that the amount that we are initially proposing is not going to cover the full cost of that system, but where there is a difference for individuals that have a particular concern for their home, and perhaps one of that eligibility criteria is then some corresponding crime data that can support that. But it then provides a little bit of extra assistance, which may then be the tipping point to assist them to actually purchase that and install it.
That's great. I'm going to try to fix an error. Councillor Marshall, you've been waiting a long time. I'm very sorry. I know. Forgive me.
Look,
Just make sure everyone can hear you now.
Look, on page 15, the second, recommendation from the other LGA is just about the Safe Passage program. Look, I really welcome the city's funds on that. Councillor Doran and I have been trying to scratch money together to fix a couple of underpasses between our two divisions, but I'd really be pushing to work with you quite quickly on that one, if that's possible, and particularly the art walk. I think we want to try and make it something which is exactly what that passage, sort of talks about that they're doing in Logan. So the process for that, what would be the process for us to... Because one's already been picked, obviously. How do we get our name in front of Helensvale?
Through the chair, Councillor
Marshall asking if he can paint a picture of himself in a underpass. Is that what you're saying?
On one side, and then he's on the other side. And then
Councillor Doran on the other side. Okay. Let's not do that. What is the process with public art that doesn't involve pictures of councillors?
Chair, Councillor, I think to try and answer that question, what post endorsement of this, making the assumption that it is endorsed, we'd then be doing direct consultation with all councillors to identify those particular priorities, and then we'd be looking to develop that specific program to implement it. So if that was identified as one of your key priorities, then that would where the program would go.
Yeah, perfect. And then I guess the second question, and again, it's part of what the research found was just the comments around the public felt that the city should do more getting to know your neighbours initiatives. As a new councillor, what, other than events in your area, are there specifics that people had mentioned have worked? Other councillors done things in the past that were, specific to getting to know your neighbours?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor. The Neighbourhood Watch action would have some input to that, but yeah, the city has trialled previously other programs around Meet Your Street and Neat Street, things like that, where we're actually offering some support to localised communities to have a community sort of connection or small event in their streets. These programs would be something we would be supporting potentially the community's Service Gold Coast teams to deliver. It also would be through any city activations, for example, active and healthy events. We can build on those and provide additional information. So sort of any opportunity the city has to conduct engagement at existing events, in addition to the potential to establish specific connection events.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just wasn't sure what was specific examples. So, yeah.
Do you have any other question? You can have the floor for as long as you like.
No, that's fine.
Did you?
That's
so
fine.
Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Hamill, and then Councillor Curtis, and then Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I think my question was relating to that trial that Councillor Gates was talking about, the interest on how that actually went. But also, I suppose my question to our team is, would be good to get the outcome of that. But has there already been any discussion that we have a CTV network that is monitored, that supports the police? Is there a way that individual businesses or homes could connect to our system that is being monitored to support the police? Or how is that connection dealt with at the moment? Do we have our camera network and the police have their own? Just really interested in that trial and the opportunity of cameras being monitored to support police.
Through the chair. So, Councillor, in terms of the trial, I'll have to take that on notice just to get the specifics of how many people were part of that particular trial and can get back to you. But can I just really clarify that that's not the intention of that action? We are looking at a grants program that incentivises the purchase of home-based security systems in the main, so pretty different, but I can get back to you with that information. In regards to the other element, which you might just remind me of very quickly.
So that's what I was interested in, the trial home network. So if we're supporting a home network and the ability for it to be connected to maybe our system and monitoring, or how does it work now with the police and with ourselves?
Through the chair. So, Councillor, in terms of the safety camera network in particular, it is a separate network, although we have a pretty robust process in place to be able to, where appropriate and where in accordance with Privacy Information Act requirements, we can share that particular vision with law enforcement agencies to assist with either response and or evidentiary collection if required. The reason for that, though, is specifically around making sure that we're really clear on what that particular program or network is being utilised for, so that the community can have confidence that it is specifically around that safety in those real entertainment precincts in particular, and making sure we comply with privacy and information requirements. We are, though, looking at, within that 10-year safety camera network plan, what opportunities do exist where there is some way, while still maintaining privacy and information requirements and still providing that community confidence, how can we, have integrated systems that provide then an additional capacity. That's probably less so around home-based networks and more about, maybe some state-based CCTV networks like, on the M1, G-Link potentially as well. That wouldn't necessarily be integrated at, if it's possible, wouldn't be necessarily integrated at city level. It'd be more likely to be at a QPS location utilised for a specific purpose.
Answer your questions, you good?
I've got a question about
Please.
that subject.
I know, just grab it. Let's do it. Let's try and just get through it.
I just want to talk about our public space, homelessness and challenges in that space. I think in the 4 years we've come a long way, but I found the last 12 to 18 months there's been a decline or a uplift in homelessness and the ability to effectively improve our public space and safety in certain areas. And I'm just interested in where that is at the moment. I think we did such a great job by Parks in the first 2-3 years that we had people in those areas. We worked really closely and got some really great results. I'm feeling we've gone back to an area where now we have no powers or there's residents congregating in certain areas. And I just want to just get maybe an understanding where we are in that space at the moment.
Through the chair, so councillor, in terms of homelessness and potentially some of the antisocial behaviours that may be associated with that, from our view, there hasn't been any tangible change in the approach, but certainly recognise that through a variety of drivers that particular issue may be increasing. In terms of specifically, I guess that connection piece, the city is really focused in on supporting, noting that there are obviously other state-based agencies, organisations that have a key responsibility in that, but we are really focusing on supporting that connection to services to help people that are in that particular situation. Where there is community concern, community complaints with significant social or antisocial behaviours and or potentially illegal activity, then we certainly utilise the full breadth that we can in terms of what we're empowered to, both under state legislation and obviously our local laws as well. But there is limitations to that, and that's where we have a real need to rely on our state-based partners to assist in that space.
Sorry, if I can just follow up on that. I suppose my concern is we were doing such a good job working with our state partners to get some real results. I feel in the last 12, 18 months, the results have declined, where we were getting really strong results. So I think the community were really buying into being patient, working with local authorities, but seeing a result at some point. We're at the stage now wherein we've been around that we're not seeing results and we're having a struggle. And I don't know where that breakdown is, but I just thought it was just a feedback of where we're at and an observation of improvement.
You want a response, or are you happy just for that to be a comment for now?
I'm happy. It's more just a comment made, but if there's something, it's more the question of do we feel there's been a breakdown at our end or with our collaborative partners?
Okay, that's a question.
Through the chair, so councillor, I guess from our perspective, not necessarily thinking that there's a breakdown in either way, but certainly acknowledge that there's a real important linkage there between City of Gold Coast and our state-based partners to make sure that service provision is seamless and that we're actually dealing with the issue. So there's real commitment from all of those organisations and agencies to continue to work on that, and certainly taking your feedback on board, and that's maybe something that we can bring up at our next partnership meeting with Queensland Police Service in particular to see how we can better work together to make sure that's happening.
Just trying to understand the difference between 2 years ago and now. That's all I'm trying to understand.
Cool. I'm going to go Councillor Hamill, then Councillor Curtis, and then Councillor Doran. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilkins, and then Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. I might try putting a question mark at the end of a statement to see if it gets us somewhere.
I'm happy people to make comments, but we are in question time, not debate.
Yeah.
So let's see how we go.
Right. So, Mr. Chair,
let's ask questions.
Mr. Chair, my question is, can I get some information from officers on what level of detail or investigation has occurred so far on an evidence base that increasing the amount of CCTV cameras in our neighbourhood areas on people's private properties would actually lead to what the community's aspiration is of more people being charged with crimes? Has this request or idea being put through QPS yet and their intelligence units to say that it would actually lead to them being able to capture more information and capture more people?
Through the chair, in relation to the safety camera network specifically. So we are about halfway through developing the 10-year plan for the safety camera network. We are going to be engaging QPS over the next 2 weeks in their intelligence team to look at some data-driven locations for where we can implement these cameras in the future. And we've also been collecting the data, the crime data, looking at our capital works program at the moment to see those best opportunities. We'll be engaging with yourselves as well to look at some of those future locations as well. Right. Does that answer your question?
That's into the broader camera safety network, and I appreciate that those locations are definitely based on QPS feedback and intelligence of where the best location is. I was more interested in the idea of providing a rebate to ratepayers on private installation of cameras. Is there any evidence or data from QPS to suggest that would actually lead to an increased network that would lead to them being able to capture more evidence of people committing crimes that would lead to more arrests, etc., etc.
Somebody go, Mr. Connery here. I can say from my perspective, my officer in charge says yes, but
through the chair, councillor. So we've had QPS intrinsically part of the engagement on this particular plan, and they were highly supportive of that particular initiative. I think their view is that in the right circumstances, like I don't think it's a panacea that's just going to solve everything, but in the right circumstances where that footage does capture what they need and where it can be released freely, that it can be utilised to increase their response to crime. But I just wanted to, I guess, underline that with we're not suggesting though that is the solve all particular action either, though.
So, Mr. Chair, to me that's important because this has come on the back of us doing a survey where we've seen a big drop in people feeling safe in our city. We've then gone to the experts in that, being QPS, to say, is this one of a series of things that we could investigate that may assist? And the evidence and suggestion from the experts in this, being QPS, is that yes, as one tool amongst many, it would actually would be a tool for them to use. My second question is, and it very much is the Councillor Gates' point about if this is the appropriate use of ratepayer funds. Well, the best people to tell us that is ratepayers.
Yep.
So where in this plan, or when would the time be that the community ratepayers have their chance to say if they think that the possibility of rebates being provided with their ratepayer funds to ratepayers to install in-home camera systems, when does that go to consultation, or when would it occur if it was going to go down that path?
Through the chair, is something we could look at in the coming months if that was the decision of the committee and council. Potentially through the budget process and the engagement through that process, or another, we might do our own selective community engagement around this if needed.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, to me, that might be something that's missing in this. We are talking about spending ratepayer funds. It's about a whole of city network approach to it. So any kind of rebate to be given on camera networks in homes, I think the community's feedback, we got it that they don't feel as safe as they used to. This is one option amongst many of things we could do. I'd be interested what their input was.
Okay. Got Councillor Curtis, then Councillor Wilkinson, then Councillor Doran.
Thanks, Chair. Mine's about the art walk, so it involves an expansion of the Art Box program. From which budget does the Art Box program currently come out of?
It's just page 21, section 2.6.
Yeah, through the chair, that comes out of our current community safety program budget. Yep.
Good enough answer? Yeah, awesome. Councillor Wilkinson. Sorry, mate. I thought you might have think that was going to go longer, and you've got your mouth full. I'm sorry.
Impeccable timing, Chair. Thank you. Excuse me. In relation, thank you, Councillor Hamill. In relation to CSP 2.1, I'm a big supporter of expanding the urban villages. I know that that's been a discussion that's already been had in this council chamber several times since I've been elected, which is, promising to see. What I'd actually just like to get a bit of clarity on from the officers in that particular point is that they will continue to engage with the council laws as part of that forward programming of capital works to deliver an expansion of the program. This is something that in my local communities I'd like to see expanded, noting that my understanding is the bulk of the safety camera network rests predominantly in those safe night precinct areas, and for good reasons, but of course not being remiss of us to think about our urban villages and those other communities that could certainly benefit from having those expanded within. So I just want to get that assurity, first of all, that councillors will be engaged as part of that feedback, and if there's any time frame for when that may occur, I'd welcome it as well.
Yeah, through the chair, the engagement around the 10-year safety camera network plan, which will incorporate the urban village expansion, will be happening in the next month to 6 weeks with councillors.
Great.
Thank you, Matt. And my second one just relates to CSP 2.7, which is the undertake a review of the city's publicly accessible defibrillators to determine additional locations, including public spaces for installation. Now, I can't recall off the top of my head the exact time of a presentation that was presented in this council chamber, but is that something that, even though it's noted in here similar to the trailer before mentioned, is that something, I haven't seen any dollar figures initially established on this particular point, but is that something that will be coming forward in as future budget considerations perhaps, or is this something that's already been done in that respect?
Yeah, through the chair, we are coming back to the next committee in March to discuss the report on DFIBs in public spaces. So that report there will detail any budget requests.
It's in the forward schedule. Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got one last question. There's a blurred line between our responsibility and the community's perception of our responsibility versus the police responsibility, and often councillors, my experience is that we are approached to deal with things that are the police's responsibility. I'd like to ask whether or not the issue I'm about to ask it's not in the report, but it is a pretty important issue in relation to the perception of safety. Has there been any consideration as to what the city can do on shared footpaths for e-bikes and e-scooters? Because particularly around Lake Orr, around where I represent, it's a rather skinny path, lots of folks walking the dogs or running, and then you have the introduction of the scooters, which does create a perception of their not being safe on their walking paths. And I feel as if that's probably something that's missing from this report.
Good question. Who'd like to take it?
Through the chair. So, Councillor, I think the intention with this specific plan, and certainly acknowledge that particular issue does have an overlay onto community safety in particular, but that is, we're probably positioning that within the regulation and compliance business as usual service that we provide, and there's currently work underway investigating that particular issue. You'd be aware that current legislation is relatively limited in terms of local government's ability to regulate that. That is something that's currently being looked at and is intended to be provided to councillors as a separate issue.
So I'm going to ask a question of you, Councillor Doran. Have you got, to me, I think that's a really good suggestion that we bring a conversation into the community safety report about that perceptions of safety in our transport network. And it occurs to me that it fits under creating safe spaces because it is a space that is ours, it's council's. What sort of initiative do you think we might be able to add as 2.10 in the creating safe spaces?
Well, I think that I'm not an expert in how we navigate the lines between state and local context. I do know that we're approached a lot around. I'm approached a lot around what we can do about this particular issue because it's mostly experienced on our footpaths, in my experience. So I'm interested, and I realise there's state responsibility, and that's where I started the question around the blurred lines between our responsibility. But there are other areas within this report where we are stepping in to state responsible areas. And so I'm curious as to whether or not, and I'm not after a GB item, but I'm curious as to whether or not it's been considered that this is an area of importance enough to the city that we could also step up a little bit without, given the lines are already blurred, Chair. So I don't know what that would look like, but I would be interested in the officer's assessment of what we can do to help the situation out in our shared paths.
So maybe the question is, has there been a conversation between you guys and the Transport Department about pedestrian assets and perceptions of safety in light of e-bikes and e-scooters?
So, Chair, in terms of that particular issue, there are conversations ongoing between the different departments in the city in regards to that particular issue. I think it would be entirely achievable if there was some sort of investigate, explore action that we could add into the plan.
Maybe 2.10 says something like devise a strategy relating to cities' pedestrian assets and the impacts on safety of that e-bikes and e-scooters have, or something along those lines. Would that sound like something we could add to the plan?
Yeah, I think so.
And
Absolutely.
would still be deliverable?
Yes.
Do you want to play with some words before we get to the resolution?
Sure.
Does that sound okay? Councillor Doran, is that a really good suggestion? It's good. Is there any other questions? All right, that's great. Well, we've got the program review, and it appears that we're going to adopt the proposed community safety program, including the definition of community safety, 4 focus area and associated actions. But we're probably also going to add, with the addition of CSP 2.10, and I can see mine's at work now.
Chair, can I just ask a question about putting the cart before the horse somewhat? like, we haven't got a lot of the detail around the initiatives that are being proposed here, and we've had another one added. And I'm personally, I'm not on this committee, so I don't vote today anyway, but I'm not really comfortable about endorsing a program, even though it does refer in the resolution, the suggested recommendation refers the additional funding commitment per annum to budget. But will that include, for example, a full report on the rebate situation? And I mean, for me, in order to support that action, I actually need information, not just that it's a recommendation that we do that. So I'm uncomfortable with endorsing the proposed program before I've had an opportunity to read what is entailed with each of these actions, because I see the cost estimates there. You know, we've got a lot of other stuff to consider in this forthcoming budget, and it's just my personal view that there's the director might wish to.
Was there a question?
Respond. Yeah. Is this ahead of when we should actually be endorsing a program because of the lack of detail in each specific area?
Super. I'm going to give that to Alicia.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Councillor Gates, I think probably the best course of action 1B there that speaks about the funding being considered in the budget deliberations, I'd be comfortable if it was suitable to councillors for us to add some more wording there that subject to further reports and information being submitted. The absolute intention of us going through the budget process would be to give you a detailed breakdown of everything and, of course, taking account all the feedback from today. So if that gives you comfort.
Well, it does, but our last budget process, with all respect, just included the distribution of the prepared documents, and there wasn't actually reports attached that would give us an opportunity. Like, if it was like this, I should imagine it will come through as a line item with the various actions and the costs attributed to it. I would like to have a report prior to that outlined the benefits of some of these initiatives and the support that has been provided for them. I don't think that's unfair. I mean, I'm all for community, a stronger perception of community safety, but I'm not sure that I can actually support the program in full as this recommendation suggests, even though those matters, that presupposes that we support everything that's there, but the detail will come to budget for approval. And I would rather have the information before budget if it is proposed, that it just comes as a line item at budget that we either leave in or take out.
So maybe then we could add a 5 that says that an action plan related to Table 1, which is the focus areas, an action plan related to Table 1 outlining in more detail those initiatives be provided in before the April
prior to
committee. It occurs to me that what's been put in this report actually has a bunch of layered extra bits that you just didn't put in the report. Like a lot of them are things you're already doing. A lot of them have got action on them. Some of them you haven't stipulated in the report because you didn't want it to be a 50-page report. Yeah, you can ask a question, but I've got Councillor Curtis first. You mind all? You okay? Yep. Councillor Curtis.
Thanks, Chair. Just while we're fleshing out what the recommendation might look like, I do have concerns with focus area 1, and I really feel for the officers because we're attempting to enhance an individual's perceptions, and it's a really difficult task to deliver that. But I think that we've just overbitten our commitment in focus area 1, that we can't possibly be responsible for increasing personal safety and security as a council. I think that we have a role to support, and I just think that word is too high modal and has led to some recommendations that overcommit us in our responsibilities, and I definitely agree with the debate we've had today that we have a role in supporting, but as far as grant programs for individuals, I'm really uncomfortable with that, and I'm not supportive of focus area 1 as it's defined, and I'd be interested to hear from other councillors and how they feel with that particular one.
So you're talking about the words on page 19 that explain increasing personal safety and security? So page 19 kind of stipulates what that area is meant to be and gives us some context around why it's important to us.
Yeah, correct. And then when we break it down on the next page in page 20, what the associated actions are.
Yep, 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3, you're suggesting that those three items shouldn't be council business?
I think that our support to them belongs, but as far as taking on responsibilities such as grant funding for personal security is beyond.
Okay. So I'm going to take that as a comment, and we're going to play that out in debate. We probably need to talk amongst committee members about how we might adjust that. So, just so I want to distill your objection, is it just the grant program for personal security devices that you're opposing, or are you opposing principally the fact that council takes any action in increasing personal safety?
It's principally the level of responsibility that we're undertaking by using terms like increasing personal safety, like that we are taking on board that responsibility as opposed to providing support to the people whose responsibility it is to increase personal security, which is the individuals themselves. So there is a principle base to it, but then it's also some of the action items.
So focus area 1 was supporting personal safety and security. You'd be okay with that, but you don't like the word of the metric of actually increasing it.
I think it's getting closer to what our role is, but then I still have some concerns about the action items as far as the grant program.
So the word increasing and action item 1.2 is your general, like that's starting to distill what you're concerned about. There was someone else who put their hand up before. I think it was Councillor Doran, and then I've got Councillor Wilkinson. I'm going to come back to that, if you don't mind. Yep.
I maybe my question is obsolete now, but I was going to ask through you, Chair, if the Deputy Mayor was referring specifically to the three items with regards to wanting more information for the budget consideration, whether you were referring to the three items in the funding and resourcing requirements, the crime detention deterrent incentive program, the artwork program and the active bystander training, rather than the entire review that's just been undertaken. That was a question from before.
I'd be more comfortable with simply noting what is proposed today, because I just don't believe that I personally, and I don't know about others, I mean, it's a very large body of work that the officers have provided to us, but with the recommendations, it doesn't provide me with what I need in order to be supportive today, because there's a lot of other issues in our city that are our core business that require addressing, and we have one bucket of funds from which to distribute everything that we need to do in our budget. So I would be more comfortable, and as I've mentioned, I'm not on this committee, so I won't be moving a change, but I would be supportive of Council noting what is proposed today and waiting for the appropriate information ahead of budget so that we can make a determination.
So let's just touch on that. I'm going to come back to Councillor Wilkinson in a second. So Councillor Doran, you asked Councillor Gates a question. It sounds like you might have a similar view. I'm not sure if that's the case or not. Just interested to know what she thought. Of course, please.
I asked the question because we were working through what to do next, and I was wondering whether, if it was just related to the funding on those three items, then we could advance the review subject to the funding being considered down the track. That's where I was asking it.
That's basically what it says at the moment, subject to budget approval. But what I'm saying is there's not sufficient information for me to decide whether those are valid things for this council to include ahead of other things in the city that we may need to fund.
So
that's all.
So based on Councillor Doran's question, I'm going to come back to officers and kind of phrase a question. So firstly, I'm fully supportive of adopting the program today because I think that's actually really important, and there's been a lot of work to get us to this point, and I think there's a pathway to give more, is it granular detail on the different actions? Like I think there's more time for us to deliver that, and I think there's an element in 5 now that talks about that action plan that I think could be subject to a future meeting. But is there any impediment to us noting the proposed and then adopting the plan as part of 5 in April? Is there any time pressure to adopt the plan today, and then we can give some certainty to Councillor Gates and potentially other councillors who might feel similarly. Yeah, so my question is time pressure.
Chair, I think that can be absolutely achieved and still be able to meet our timelines.
Yeah, great. Awesome. So, Councillor Gates, what I'd hate to have happen is us make a recommendation as a committee and then have you speak against it for whatever reason at full council. Well, I'd love to have the Deputy Mayor's support on things as important as community safety. If we were to note it today and then incorporate that action plan at the April meeting with an intent to adopt the plan at that time, would that be something you could support? Or
if council noted what is proposed today and it's subject to another report, absolutely.
Yeah,
That's exactly what I would like to see.
Okay, so let's is there a word we need to add to 5 to give that? Because I don't know if that's everyone's view on the committee, but I don't think that practically changes. So that loosely what we're proposing then is that one would say that council notes the proposed A and B, and that an action plan relating to tab 1 and 5, and then be brought back to the April Lifestyle, Heritage and Resilient Lure Committee for adoption of the plan. Councillor Doran, another good question. Yes, it's still subject to budget because 1B really makes it, Councillor Gates, does that sound like it's worded better?
I'm happy.
Yeah, okay, great. So I'm still with Councillor Doran, and then I'm with Councillor Wilkinson, and then I'm with Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair.
And then I'm going to come back to Councillor Curtis.
Just to note on the follow on the comments from Councillor Curtis in relation to the wording, so as not to be inconsistent, I'd ask that officers also look at the wording on Focus Area 4 for the same intentions that Councillor Curtis raised before about her concern over putting a requirement on us to get an action out of this. And it's not saying I support it, but if you're going to have a look at number 1, you probably need to look at number 4 as well. If you'll have a look at that, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Got it. Thanks, Councillor Doran. I've got Councillor Wilkinson, then Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. And if you'd indulge, just while we are tinkering with things, just with relevance to number 2, whether or not we could potentially word it to keep most of it, but just to read as the council notes that the 2028 Community Safety Program will be developed in collaboration with state government and frontline agencies. Because I think that then captures the QPS things that you're already doing, but again, it's just not identified in this report. And it also, when you go to talk to them about, we discuss neighbourhood watch groups, for instance, they would be the ones to provide the insight on the intricacies of how they do those programs to start with. So, I just don't know if it's the appetite of this forum today, whether we include it or not.
The concern that I have that is that whilst we try to collaborate with the state government in every matter, really. Like when there's a state government interest involved, we try to collaborate. I think by saying that, I don't want to think that our community safety program is contingent on their support for it or otherwise.
State government and frontline agencies, not the government themselves, just those different agencies or authorities, if you wanted to call it of another word.
Okay.
I don't know if that's more clarity in the relation. I don't want us to be going to the Premier about this. I just want us to be talking with those authorities, if that makes sense.
Question to you, Luke or Alicia, is by adding that changing what we're doing, really? Are we doing that anyway?
Through the Chair, in particular, so the Mayor's Safer Suburbs Forum has all of those agencies we've just discussed on it, so they've actually been intrinsic to developing this particular plan, so we're absolutely conducting a lot of liaison. Not just liaison, but collaboration with those agencies.
Yeah. So I don't think it adds or subtracts anything by putting it in there. But Councillor Wilkinson, if it gives you more comfort, then I'm really happy to put it in there.
If it's not an issue as far as adding it in, and I think it reflects a bigger picture of what we're doing, I would like to see it. But yeah.
Thanks for that one, Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question in relation to the future report. It's just in relation to that grant of say $350K per year with that future report. Weigh up whether we're spending as part of the grant for the individual residents that request it versus that allocation to, say, public CCTV or crime prevention. Could officers expand on why that would be better bang for buck, essentially, for ratepayers to be allocated to that program?
It's a good question. might be a bit more ideological than the go on.
Through the chair, could I just ask in terms of clarification around that particular question? So, Councillor, in terms of, are you asking in terms of why would we allocate funds to that at all?
The competitive tension between allocating $350,000 to personal security in people's homes versus $350,000 allocated to the public CCTV network. Why is it that officers have recommended the allocation to personal security instead of uplifting the CCTV? I think that's kind of what you're getting at. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor, I think what we are suggesting is that that particular allocation absolutely does not impact on future asks around the safety camera network enhancement. So that 10-year safety camera network plan will articulate some of those additional recommendations for council to also consider, sort of be on top of, not one or the other. However, specific to this particular rebate action, that has come to the fore primarily because of the results of that Safe City survey, and it's directly associated to try and contribute to some of those top safety concerns. In addition to that, with the benchmarking in particular, it has been successful in other local government areas, demonstrating that there is a level of incentivisation for those personal home securities. So it's those elements that have really pushed us to put that into the plan, along with the fact that it's actually been sort of driven by all of our partners and also consultation with councillors to actually have that particular incentive program.
So I think what we've heard today is some general criticism of the idea that we allocate $350,000 to personal security devices through a grant system where individuals might get $250 discount subsidy on some sort of device. And I think there's enough scepticism amongst councillors for us to really take a good hard look at that as part of this next 60 days. One thing we need to, obviously, Councillor Curtis has obviously raised very similar concerns, not just about that CSP 1.2, but also about the name of that focus area. Is there I'm trying to take a bit of a straw poll here. Is there a view in council that we want to not do that principally and provide direction to officers today? So maybe just raise your hand if you would like to not create a grant program that gives up to $250 off a personal security device for someone's home. Okay. Yeah, okay. Just note it for now and come back to it. All right, great, awesome. That's on notice. Well, let's talk that through. So is there any other questions that people have about? We have a recommendation here, Councillor Curtis. By delaying the adoption of this plan and adding the action plan element for a later adoption, does that satisfactorily deal with your concerns about that category, or would we lose your support by moving forward with what we have?
Yeah, no, I don't want to be obstructive, and I think that my concerns have been heard. I think my residual ones were that we were sending the officers off on a direction that I wasn't sure how everybody else feels about the grant program, but I feel like it's been aired that there's enough scepticism there that they're not going to go do a bulk of work for something that may not get up. So I feel comfortable, and I'm happy to support with just what's been aired as concerns, great. And I feel confident that the officers understand.
That's great. Awesome. So I think greater information about where other local governments have experimented with this plan and seen it be successful or not successful would be really helpful information in order for us to kind of form our view on the next stage of the process. Do I have a mover of this item? Councillor Doran, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. So we have a motion. It was moved by Councillor Doran, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Doran, do you want to say a few words about community safety?
Thank you, Chair. So it's been interesting to hear the debate, and obviously thank you for the briefings that we received and the report from officers along the way. I expressed some scepticism with officers during my briefing that this was a very, very difficult task to come up with a program which we would all hope would eliminate crime and make people feel safe, and it's a very difficult task. And I note that not everything is entirely supported in it by all of us for every element of it, but I think that the goal of trying to create a safer Gold Coast is certainly a noble one. And I think we also need to remember that This body of work was undertaken, this review was undertaken in response to the perception of crime statistics that we received in a report last year. And so I welcome the initiatives. I think that there's worthiness to it, and I think that the safety camera expansion is a good idea. I know I would welcome more in my area. I've got some specific locations I'll send through. I know that there's a competitive tension, Chair, from councillors to get those anti-hooning trailers in our divisions, in certain spots where we experience reckless driving. I think that more of those is good, even if it's not perfect. I think that having more and doing more and showing actions rather than just communication pieces is a good thing for the community, because I think that is how you chip away at the perception. I welcome trying to counter some of the perception which is created by Facebook stories that might be not in our area, but they do create a level of anxiety in the community if you see an action in someone's house or a break-in or a car stolen. It does heighten tensions, and I think countering that and talking to some statistics around what is experienced, whilst at the same time not negating those feelings in the community, is a worthy cause too. And I think in relation to the proposed grant program, and I'm noting the scepticism, and I respect the scepticism of my fellow councillors, I think the part of the program which probably needs to be considered in its intent, not in whether it will create this outcome, but it's in its intent, is to reduce the perception of safety, or to increase the perception of safety. And you could put that another way, Chair, increasing or removing or making people feel safer is actually making people feel safer on the Gold Coast, not just in their own home, but it's on the Gold Coast. And, we're a tourist town, we're a growing town, city, sorry, and I think a place where people feel safe is again a worthy cause. I think also that program will act not so much as an extension of law enforcement, but a deterrence. If you can see a camera, you might not do an action. It also is evidence collection, but voluntary. It's not linked into a system. If someone crashes out the front of my house and there's a camera there, you might offer that evidence to police or to somebody to help them find the person who crashed in their car. So there are some worthy elements to it that need to be considered, and I understand and respect the view of councillors with some scepticism. I think it's worth exploring further, and I welcome that coming back for all councillors with a bit more detail as to how and why we've come up with that particular program. But I welcome the review, and I think that we should endorse this recommendation today and then look at those new elements in the future, which I think is just good committee work, is making sure that we do it in a really responsible way. So.
That's great. Thanks, Councillor Doran. Did anyone want to express concerns or object or speak against the motion? All right. With that in mind, I think we've come. Thank you for the debate today, and thank you for even those who aren't on the committee for participating. Officers, thank you for the work that you're doing. Obviously, it's a great body of work. We do want to be a safe city. It's something that's central to what we're trying to do as a council. So I think we have a clear direction here. I'll take the vote. Are you happy to see closing? Yeah. I'll take the vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Thanks, team. It's great having planning regulation at Lease. You're always welcome here. Yeah, we're going to take a short recess of 5 minutes so people can duck to the loo after almost 2 hours. Thanks. Nick, sorry. I think we're still live streaming. Someone want to press the button? So we just heard about community safety and, you know, catching all the bad guys, and we're now going to have a bit of a chat about catching all the bad weeds and animal pests. Alex, is there a presentation today?
No, Chair, we don't have a presentation because we have provided the committee with a briefing on the draft plan and the survey results at a previous meeting last year. Yep. This is now the final Gold Coast Biosecurity Plan for 2025 to 2032 that we present to you today, recommending that Council adopts this plan. There are 10 species that we have identified in the plan that we will be targeting over the next several years. Of those 10 species, 7 are plants. Then we have fire ants, as well as the the red-eared slider turtles, and then the rabbit as well. Of the plants, we're on track for eradicating, which is really fantastic. This plan was informed by over 600 responses from the community survey that we completed last year. And that's all we have for you today. That's so great. Happy to take any questions, and the team's here as well.
Did anyone come with questions about the biosecurity plan? Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my question was just in regards to the monitoring and progress evaluation through the plan to 2032. So we've got an objective of eradication. What benchmarks and timelines will be used through the process to evaluate that we're on track for eradication for all of the 10 identified species?
Through the Chair, yes, we definitely have a monitoring and evaluation approach. And if I wouldn't mind just asking Manager Hadley Mills to provide you with more detail around that.
Through the Chair, thanks very much for the question. It's a really good question, actually. Basically, the best way I can answer that is to say that we will be developing a monitoring and reporting program in the next year or so. It's a really complex thing to do across multiple species. We've got various levels of maturities for different species in regards to monitoring and reporting, but what we want to do is really standardise that process. So, as I said, we will be developing a holistic program around that.
And if I could also add to that, so for example, with the plant species and other species, we do conduct field surveys on our own land, and then we work with stakeholders in other parts of the organisation to understand how those species are going on private land as well. So there is a lot of field work that goes into that, and there'll probably be some mapping tools, data tools that we use. But as Hadley mentioned, all of that will go into more detailed monitoring planning. And the other aspect is the community survey as well, so that we can understand what people are seeing, and we're utilising the eyes and ears on the ground to help understand how we're going with eradication.
That's great. Any other questions? Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask around how we determined some of the plant species especially. So, for example, I've got a serious problem in Division 11 with Salvinia, and it's not made its way. It looks like on the feasibility of control matrix, it's just behind alligator weed, but I wanted to understand how you determine which is a bigger priority, because in my area, Salvinia seems to be a cost burden to the city, as well as something that I'm told is very difficult to remove, and I'm trying to understand why more effort isn't put into that. And there's probably a great reason. I'm wondering if you could help me out.
Yeah, Hadley.
Through the Chair, I might get our Biosecurity Officer, Ian Jameson, to answer that one.
Great to have you back, Mr. Jameson. Tell us about Salvinia. Did you hear the question?
Through the Chair, yes, I did hear the question. Thank you very much. So it's feasibility of managing Salvinia. It's very widespread in the city. Areas we control it continually reinfest from other, less controlled areas.
Please, yeah, go ahead.
So I guess when we determine our plan to eradicate species, some will be harder than others, I assume. I'm trying to just make sure that it's not included in the priority species because it's too hard.
Through the Chair, I can assure you we are making our utmost efforts to manage Salvinia to the best of our available resources. And we need to understand that the widespread nature of some of these species means that the level of resourcing required is beyond our current means.
So that's my last question, Chair, is in relation to, I was hoping you were going to go there, because one of the feedbacks I receive is that the team doesn't need any more money. It's resourced well enough, but we do have an ongoing problem and we're constantly reacting to growth. And so the community I represent, which is, I don't know if it's more or less than other communities, but it is quite prevalent throughout Robina, is why don't we just put a bit more capital into it and get rid of it for good, rather than constantly responding to the growth, getting that out. Growth, getting out seems that we're a reactionary response to that particular invasive weed, and and why isn't it? Why can't we do more to get rid of it?
Yeah, so maybe you could speak to the cost-benefit analysis that's undertaken to determine which weeds make the list. I don't know if that's probably for Hadley as a more or higher, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Through the Chair, so we have this this invasion curve. So it goes from everything from basically, you protect a species from coming in, all the way through to when a species is completely ubiquitous in a landscape. In between, you have eradication, or you have another tool, which is containment. And on the bottom of that curve, you essentially have a cost-benefit analysis. So your best bang for buck is obviously to keep a species out, keep an invasive species out. At the other end of the scale, you've got asset protection, which is essentially you protect any values you have from that invasive species. So we've got to make decisions right along that invasion curve, and essentially, our 10 species in 8 years is the result of that prioritisation.
So I think there's an ideological piece around here. If we added $300,000 to the weed management budget, would it go to Salvinia, or would it go to something else that's a more important weed and a more eradicatable weed? I mean, I've used that figure arbitrarily. I'm not trying to say we should. I'm just trying to pose a question.
So we'd have to do a two-step process to determine that. To answer that question, one would be a risk assessment around what's the next invasive species on that curve, and the second question is resourcing and how much that specific resourcing might get bang for buck wise.
Yeah, and is there any limitation for council resolving to do that despite this biosecurity plan being adopted today?
Chair, no, that the council can certainly inform how we, prioritise our resources. The purpose of this plan is to guide us and the council's resources to focus on those species that we think we have the greatest chance at eradicating, but also those that pose the biggest threat to our environment.
And also meet our obligations under the Biosecurity Act.
And meet our obligations under the Biosecurity Act. So it is it's difficult because we can't deal with every pest species, every invasive species. However, this plan was informed by the science, the data, working with the state and understanding, to come up with this list.
Of course.
That said, such as with the deer, where we understand that there might be a more localised issue, we can certainly work to understand whether we can put additional resources outside of this into those species. It's something we can have a look at if that's what council is asking us to do.
So I think, Councillor Doran, just to confirm back your question about Salvinia, if council at a later date were to resolve to allocate funding above and beyond what's kind of stipulated in this plan in order to meet a certain or address a certain need, we could, I don't think there's anything preventing us from doing that, but the biosecurity plan that we're adopting today is partly a legislative obligation that we have under the Biosecurity Act, and obviously sets the tone for the broader program delivery. Any other questions?
No, thank you, and thank you for clarifying that. So the question originated from how do we decide this one and why not Salvinia? I appreciate that this is not a new issue with the team, and if there's opportunities to better manage it or manage it more intensely in the future outside of this, I would welcome that, but I appreciate the clarification as to how we arrived at the 10.
Awesome. Councillor Wilkinson, are you moving the item or are you got a question? Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
It's close though. It's close. More danger.
And I'll be brief. Can you, through you to the EGM, can you just give me just a bit of insight as to how we landed on setting it to 2032? So the reason why I ask that is just coming back to the eradication through the former plan, which was 2019 to 2024. We had our 10 in 10 years, which a number of those invasive species were listed on that, and we were aiming for 29. Now, I'm just wondering, there's obviously been an increase in a few years, and those, like I said, not all, but most are still listed on that. Was it consideration around, was it, potential election cycle? Why did we pick 32 to be our next dead end, I guess, as such, for the time frame of the next plan?
Chair, I'll invite Ian to answer that question, if that's okay, or Hadley. Yep.
That was a good handball both ways. I like that. Flick pass. I liked it. Sorry, Hadley, you're up.
Through the chair, there wasn't any specific, reason why we necessarily chose that date. It was a date that aligned with the Olympic Games. It also it was a reasonable time frame in my mind around where we could get to with regarding looking at the program and looking at where we're at with each of the species, and then making a judgment on where we should land with eradication of those species.
Happy with that answer? You want to go again?
Of course. I just thank you for that, and it's more to the point that I just want to make it clear, I guess, on public record. It wasn't for the fact that we thought we're not going to meet that target. No one can accuse us of saying, "Well, you weren't going to read it, so you just pushed it out." I don't believe that for a second. I just wanted to get some clarity around why, on a number of those things, when we put a measure in, we obviously try to reach that, but there's obviously reasons for why we can set other dates in due course as well. So I just thought I'd raise that as part of the point.
And through the chair, our natural city strategy, which is our umbrella environment strategy, has the same time frame to 2032. So I guess there's some strong alignment there, and eradication of invasive species would be a very big indicator as to how we're going in delivering Our Natural City program as well.
That's great. Thanks. Councillor Martin had a question?
Chair, it's quite minor here, but just given we're looking for endorsement, I think it's a typo there because...
So just on matter of typos, the whole book has, or the whole plan has been re-edited for typos. There was 5 typos. So we're going to have a bingo system to see if you've picked one up they've already emailed to me.
Excellent. Well,
so you guys get a prize if he's picked one. Yeah.
Well, at last meeting we talked about the 10 in 8, which I appreciate now. It's eradicating 10 species by 2032. It's just the contents page still lists 10 in 8 instead of the eradicating 10 species by 2032.
Is that a new one?
Hey.
So Councillor Martin will get a prize.
Excellent. So it's minor, but just wanted to make sure I shared that. So it's on page 112. And as part of that, just seeing when will our tracking towards 2032 come back, I guess, how we're going. Is it halfway 2026 or annually?
How often do we review the biosecurity plan at council? Through you, through me to you, Hadley.
Through the chair, every 4 years we do a full review. However, that doesn't mean we can't do a minor review anytime annually. So,
do you want an annual update on biosecurity?
I don't know whether annual's necessary. I mean, less about the plan.
Does it include Salvinia? Councillor Doran wants a full report on Salvinia every 3 months.
To that point, I think it's around the eradication of 10 species. It's more around track it. Essentially how we're tracking performance
against the 4 year plan.
Perhaps there is if the officers could provide advice, as to how often that would be useful for councillors, annually or biannually.
Yeah.
Through the chair, we could do an update to councillors
each year,
annually.
Yeah, that's great. Let's do it. Councillor Martin, do you want to just adjust the recommendation to include that an annual report be provided to the LER committee?
That would be perfect. Yep, that an annual report be provided to the LER committee on the performance of the I don't think we need to say eradication.
What's the words you want to use?
Performance of
the plan?
Our biosecurity plan.
Chair, we can provide a progress update, annual progress update, as we're track progress towards the
on the performance of the plan.
Performance, yeah.
So say that instead of
progress.
Annual report, call it annual progress.
Progress, yeah.
Yeah. Progress update.
Progress update.
Yeah.
And then get rid of the word report. Be provided to the LER committee on the performance of the plan. So you're not allowed to have... No? Yeah, I think you have to spell that out, I think. Sorry to do that to you. It's a long committee name. So that is moved by Councillor Martin, and I'm happy to second that.
Yep.
Did anyone have any other questions? Councillor Martin, do you want to talk about how important it is to get rid of animal and weed pests in the city?
Just briefly, but thank you, officers, for the report. And I know that we've previously had a brief and it's been tweaked, and it's great to see the city as part of our obligations to have this in play, our statutory obligations, seeing the efforts going towards both our pest animals and pest plant species. So thank you for the update and pleased to support.
So there were some minor grammatical errors in the report that will be updated as an operational matter. I haven't included that in the recommendation, but I'm saying it in open just so you guys know. Fix your spelling errors. Thanks very much. And if you can add Councillor Martin's little adjustment, that'd be great as well. Cool. I'm going to leave that as closing. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. Now, the matter that everyone has been waiting for, Burleigh Waters Community Centre. I'm assuming we have quite a comprehensive presentation on this one. No, maybe not. Okay. Welcome, Jodie. Do you want to just introduce the item, just so we've got a bit of a picture of what's happened and where we're at?
Yep. So thank you through the chair. We've got 2 petitions that we've rolled into one response for the Burleigh Waters Community Centre, looking to access that site in different ways. Yes. And we're just got some recommendations not in support of that. So I'm happy for Mark to come out and answer any questions as well if you've got them.
Great. So we've got some officers who can answer questions if you like. But Councillor Marshall, I understand that you are the divisional councillor for this area. Have you been consulted about this?
Yeah, we've had briefings on this, and look, I was supportive of the U3A Broadbeach coming in and utilising the space, and I understand Councillor Doran for the Varsity Lakes group as well in a similar setup. But I am happy with the recommendations, and I understand there's an expression of interest for one of the rooms to be available, and one of these 2 groups certainly can put an expression of interest for that room. I do note the report that there's been an enormous increase in its usage since we did the redevelopment, and I think by, leaving that open and we can maximise the amount of community groups that access that space, I think it's whilst I wouldn't have said it originally because I thought it was a good thing to recommend our group to utilise that space, I think it's a better thing for the community to be available for a range of community groups rather than have sort of like an anchor group in there.
Great. So with that in mind, would you happy to move it? And Councillor Doran, are you happy to second it?
I have questions.
Your questions? Let's do questions. Great. Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from Councillor Marshall's comment around the increased usage, and I note that was in the report and conveyed to me personally, since the correct me if I'm wrong, but since the renovations, there's the facilities had an increase. I think Mark, you might have referred to as foot traffic or people using the space. Can you just confirm that metric for me before I ask my question?
So is your question, how often is it used?
It leads to the next one. How they, because there was a specific way with which they measured how many people were using it.
Okay.
Yeah, through the chair, we've said it's increased by 82%, but that's actually visitations of actually patrons coming in the facility.
So my question was, and this isn't a surprise to Mark, Chair, because I did ask the question, so he's probably got some good notes there. They've had 2 elections since the works were done, and this was a pre-poll venue.
Oh, as in a vote. It's a voting venue.
Correct.
Okay.
And so I suppose the breakdown between whether or not it's actually used for community use or whether or not it's just that 82% was the 15,000 that voted in my particular area during the local elections.
So your question is our 82% metric driven by people going to vote?
Which is not a consistent community use, but rather an event.
Okay. Yep. Through the chair, in the report, it's 4% of the usage or the patronage is through the state election. I don't know the actual numbers, but there's 4%. We've also had an increase in bookings of 500 new bookings. So it's the election definitely assisted and would have assisted with the utilisation, but there has been also a significant increase in other activities.
So can I just clarify what you just said, that of the total usage, 4% of it is state election, 96% is other activities, and there's 500 new bookings that have come through the centre that aren't state election related?
Correct.
Great. Sorry, Dan. You still got the floor, mate?
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor.
And so the perception from the Varsity Lakes Community Centre was that, which led to their petition, Chair, was that the centre was underutilised. And is it right to assume, based on the report and the decision by council not to therefore put a master lessee, that in fact that isn't the case? It is really well utilised, and in fact we would be deterring from the community use to put in a master lessee to take over that facility?
Yeah. Within the precinct itself, there's 4 different bookable spaces. So there's a meeting room, an activity room and a hall. They're both used very highly in great utilisation. The meeting room 1 and 2 are lower, and council officers have assessed that. We strongly believe if we could actually put a lessee into one of those meeting rooms and still be able to get the great community need and demand that we need for that facility.
So just 2 more quick questions,
of course,
Chair. So if you did that based on the increase in usage, Mark, if you did that and you undertook the EOI that's proposed, wouldn't you subtract from potential need for that space if the increase in participation continues?
Through the chair, yes, we would. But they are, as I said before, the officers have assessed those meeting rooms, and there is ability to have more utilisation in those 2 meeting rooms. When we assess it and look at who's currently in meeting room 1 and 2, we believe we can consolidate the current users into one of the meeting rooms and then still have an expression of interest for the other meeting room, which would grow the utilisation of that precinct.
And I suppose the final question, Chair, is based on the fact that there were 2 petitions for the use, one obviously from a group within Varsity Lakes and U3A, which is Broadbeach, I think, were floating around looking for a home. Does this, the outcome from these 2 petitions to maintain the facility, does it demonstrate that there is an undersupply of quality community facilities in our areas, respective areas, to accommodate the needs at the moment?
That was a big question.
It's a loaded.
Do we have enough community centres?
Through the chair, it's. I think that for me, the community service and facility review is probably looking at that and where the need and demand is. I don't know right on the top of my head if there's a need or demand in that area, but I'm sure I could reflect that back to the community service and facility review.
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Martin, I think you raised your hand.
Thanks, Chair. My question was in relation to attachment 4, but it's on grey paper, and I'm just wondering if that's the backside of our next presentation, or it is in fact
attachment
confidential because it's the Burleigh Waters Community Centre.
Let me have a look.
Page 207. Actually, I've just gone to page 181, and it does actually say confidential next to it.
the detail, the written detail underneath. Okay, so the written detail underneath is the stuff that's probably a bit confidential, but the table that talks about past year's financial reporting is not confidential because nothing that's in the past of that nature is confidential. Do you want to think about your question, or do you want to move to closed?
I think my question is noting the past relating to the future. So I think I'm on shaky ground. So I think I probably need to.
Do you want to move to closed?
Move to close.
So,
Chair.
Councillor Mutton's moved us to close to ask a question on the basis of budget matters, both now and in the future, which I think budgetary matters is a standard. Do I have a second to move to closed? Councillor Wilkinson, all those in favour? We'll just quickly close the meeting and get this matter dealt with. Thank you, streaming. All right, we've dealt with those questions as substantively as we can. Did anyone have any other questions that are not enclosed? Councillor Marshall, given it is a community centre in your area, are you happy to move the item?
I am.
And Councillor Doran, are you happy to second it? It's great. Excellent. Councillor Marshall, do you want to speak about how important this community centre is to you?
Yeah, look, thank you, Chair. And I want to thank the officers for doing the report. And I guess, in a way, as a new councillor, I guess highlighting the fact that there has been significant revitalisation following, the refurbishment of the area and an 82% increase in the visitations, which shows that it's going really well at that centre. The Community Services and Facilities Review did sort of identify this Burleigh Waters Community Centre, I guess, as a key piece, particularly in my division, with new things to come in that area. So I think it's a really exciting sort of space and area. I do support the officer's decision that we're not putting in, I guess, a master or anchor tenant, because I think that gives more community groups more access to this space. But I also note that as a part of the report, there was the opportunity to put in an expression of interest for that meeting room 1, so that one, if not both of the groups, can apply to do that and utilise that space even more. So, thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Councillor Marshall. Did anyone want to speak for or against? Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. I reiterate the comments of Councillor Marshall and thank the officers for looking into this matter on behalf of these two groups. I felt it would be remiss not to point out that this isn't a reflection on the quality of the work that these two community groups do throughout our division, but also U3A throughout the Gold Coast. And specifically to the Varsity Lakes Community Resource Centre, they have reinvigorated a tired old centre and made it a real meeting place for a lot of people who need the social connection and need services that aren't provided anywhere else in my division. I think that growing their footprint will be good for the community, and whilst I understand and appreciate the reasons why this is not the right place for their expansion, I'm going to say here today that if there is opportunity exists within my division to give them more space to do more good for the community, I will always seek to try to do that for them. And for the U3A, we know that learning at any stage in life is important, and continuing to do so at the University of the Third Age is incredibly important as well. And we thank them both for putting in their interest to establish operations here. And I think the sensible outcome is achieved by this recommendation, Chair.
Great. Anyone have any other comments? Great. I have a mover in Councillor Marshall, a seconder in Councillor Doran. All those in favour? That motion is carried. The next report we have, I think Mark and the team are going to stick around for. Is that right? Yeah. It is in closed session, and it relates to the Gold Coast Sports Precinct Concept Master Plan. The report is going to provide an update on the master plan, but has already been aired with quite a lot of key stakeholders. There's been some consultation that's happened over a number of months now. So some of what we see today is really non-confidential, even though the paper itself is confidential. It's confidential on the basis that it involves commercial matters, and also that some of the report and presentation involves matters pertaining to state-owned land, and not wanting to prejudice their interests. We want to make sure that we, act prudently and go to closed session. After the meeting, however, there are quite a number of elements that are in the public domain or non-confidential, including some images that you'll see, and we are distributing those so you can share them if you would like, if it is important to you or you would like to. And I just want to double check, the handout that we're getting right now is non-confidential, or is it confidential?
Through the Chair, the first page is confidential, the last two are not.
Okay. Did everyone get that?
It's on the bottom of the footer.
The first page is confidential in the handout. The second two pages are not. And the reasons for that confidentiality, like I said before, is that relates to we're required to keep things confidential under a law or formal arrangement with the Commonwealth or the state, and negotiations related to commercial matters. So I'm happy to move to closed. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Castra is going to second that motion. All those in favour? Let's move to close. Please turn the So while we've just seen the start of the presentation, and I'll just ask us to obviously remove the presentation from the screen while we're doing that, Councillor Castra has raised a matter relating to a potential conflict of interest, and the details of which I think have been prepared. Councillor Castra, in not having heard from you before the item, I knew that it was coming, but I thought you might not be raising it because of its nature. But do you want to make your declaration in the public domain?
Yeah, well, look, just want to make a declaration that which involves KDV Sport. My wife is the general manager of KDV Sport. The nature of the related interest is, as I say, the KDV Sport is owned by my brother-in-law. I am asking to stay in the room. For the reason I'm asking to stay in the room for this is an important presentation about the going forward with the sporting precinct, which is all based in Division 8. KDV Sport is not part of the sporting precinct that is under discussion, so I don't believe that there really is any impact in that sense. But given that KDV sits literally just outside that area, adjacent to the city's major sporting precinct, I just feel that I should openly declare that in case any councillors feel that that I shouldn't take part in any discussions.
Of course. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Castra? He's stated that the subject or the property in question is not in the report and not part of the master plan, but is adjacent. And does anyone have any questions? No. Does anyone want to move the motion, the procedural motion on the screen? Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. So the motion is that Councillor Castra, despite the conflict, may participate in the decision despite the councillor's conflict because the interest is of a minor and remote nature, such that a reasonable person would trust that the final decision will be made in the public interest. Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Martin, is hoping to second that.
Was there some extra wording that was on there before that was removed, just above that, in that section, the reasons for my participation? Was there something else there before?
Yes, Councillor Castra provided some reasons why his participation would improve decision making. That was in there.
Relating to Hodder or
you don't have to.
Or something?
It doesn't form part of the motion that we're discussing there.
Right. Okay.
Sorry. Given that it was part of the form that he filled in, I might ask that we administratively insert that. It doesn't form part of the motion that we're discussing. So the motion is a procedural motion moved by...
No, that doesn't add up. Former board member, no, sorry.
Do you want that in or not?
You have to show us that again.
So the reasons my participation, yeah, there's nothing there for that. No, that was an old one. Well, clearly
I don't need to explain. I'll just see it was on the screen as something about Hodder.
Do you want to put a reason in there? That you're a Division 8 councillor and this is in Division 8?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So I think that my participation is important, given that I represent this entire area, and I should be there to participate in discussion on something that's going to impact not only my local community but the sporting fraternity, the sports fraternity.
You're using a lot of words and it's making it hard to type.
Yes, there we go. I'm the divisional councillor, and I should be.
Might I guide you? That Councillor Castra is, the reasons why my participation was, he's the Division 8 councillor and represents constituents in the area. Are you happy with that simple wording?
Yes, I am.
Great. And if we just go down to the procedural motion that we...
Yeah, I don't know what that hot thing was.
Just a minute on.
Yeah.
As a former board member, Hodder and destination,
yeah. You guys can tidy up the typos later. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. No. So Councillor Wilkinson has moved that Councillor Castra may participate in the decision despite the councillor's conflict of interest because the interest is minor and of a remote nature, such that a reasonable person will trust that decision was made in the public interest. It was seconded by Councillor Martin. Did anyone want to speak against that motion? Okay, all those in favour, and we have a division. Councillor Tozer, Councillor Curtis, Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Martin, Councillor Doran, Councillor Marshall, and Councillor Castra did not vote. That motion is carried. Now, Councillor Castra, as I recall, you had a second one you wanted. Are you happy? That to me, that's. I think that I think the complexity of it is, but I don't want to speak for you if you want to make another declaration. Great, awesome. Alrighty, so I'm going to move to closed for the same reasons we did before. It relates to a commercial matter and a matter relating to a law of the Commonwealth or state. So moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Martin has seconded that motion to move to closed. All those in favour? Let's move back into closed. In favour? That motion is carried. Let's turn the stream back on. All right. So, Councillor Castra, given this Gold Coast Sports Precinct is in Division 8, did you feel comfortable moving the recommendation today, or did you have any additions you'd like to make to it?
No, look, I'm more than happy to move the recommendation.
I'm happy to second it. That's great. Do you want to speak to it?
There's not a lot I can say, obviously, but as you can see there in number 2, we're endorsing a master plan for the Gold Coast Sports Precinct. As we really need to look to the future, sport is a huge industry in our city. We accommodate a lot of national and international sport in this precinct already. We're expecting nothing other than growth and more demand in this area, so we need to look to the future over the next 20 to 25 years as to what we need to do there to accommodate not only community sport but elite sport and offer the best possible model that we can to ensure that we continue to get the national and international interest in this area so that we can bring teams and events to our city. So this is very embryonic at this stage. We need to go out to speak with the community and stakeholders to get input from all sectors. But it's just really good to see that the city is thinking ahead as we need to do and preparing for growth.
I'd add to that. Look, I think this is a very exciting master plan. It's already been discussed with some of the key stakeholders. And when I say it, I mean, you know, the current uses of the site have been discussed with key stakeholders and their feedback has been, you know, what's informed our moving forward. And Urbis and the team have put together a pretty exciting proposal or master plan concept for us to have a look at. And it'll be great to see how the community responds. And frankly, you know, I think the pictures that will be in the public domain kind of depict, you know, an expansion to that main Carrara indoor stadium precinct, an elevation of the fields at Alabaster that are plagued by bad weather and house lots of, house lots of local soccer teams and other sports, and also depict some changes to the stadium precinct and surrounds. So people will be able to work out that as time goes on, and frankly, getting people's feedback is critically important to the success of this master plan ultimately being delivered. Did anyone want to speak against? All right, we have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Was there any general business that people came with today? No? I'm going to call the meeting closed at 12:11.